Hi everyone. So I think we all know in the room how healthcare domain is a very complex and very regulated domain. And finally, as just seen before, we really see a game changer with AI and generative AI to transform healthcare. It's been very challenging for many, many years to try to transform healthcare with digital. But today we have solutions to really be a game changer, to accelerate research, to have more precise medicine, and also all physician and patient experience for a better outcome for the patient. But on the other hand, there is new risks that are rising, and those risks, we need to manage them, to identify them, and that's where actually responsible AI coming to play. So Marc, can you give us a bit of deep dive about those risks and what is responsible AI framework?
Yes, thanks Arnaud. Yes, you're right. AI in general and generative AI in particular introduce a new set of risks, and this system can be attacked in a new, innovative way. Through the language or the content it consumes or it produces. And this type of attack can be quite blurry or chaotic. It's partly because these systems are non-deterministic. Saying the same thing twice may generate a different answer, or a slight change in input may lead to different output. So as you can see, and the list is not exhaustive, there are a lot of type of risk and a lot of type of attack potential on AI system. Obviously, it will take me all the rest of the day or the morning to go through it. So I would just give you 2 or 3 examples. First, very well known, it's prompt injection, also called jailbreak. It's when a user is crafting its prompt in order to try to override the built-in model security or limitations in order to drive the model to have a behavior it was not supposed to have. Indirect prompt injections, it's a little bit different. It's when an attacker is successfully embed malicious command inside third-party content, like web page, email, or document. So when the model will process this information, it will interpret this harmful command as legitimate user instruction, for examples. Another example is confabulation. I prefer than hallucination. It's when the model generates data that are not truth, or at least not grounded in the context provided to the model. And last example, harmful content is obvious. It's when the model starts to generate dangerous, violent, degrading, obscene content that may hurt the users. So you understand with these examples why having a risk-based approach is not an option, and you need to put in place a responsible AI governance framework, especially with the coming EU AI Act that will impose strict requirements on high-risk systems. So, for example, at Microsoft in 2023, we use a responsible AI standard to formalize a set of requirements specific to the generative AI system, and we align those standards to the core pillars of the NIST AI risk management framework. The first one is govern. We need to make sure that we're developing our system according to a responsible AI standard and values. Map is to be able to identify the risk in order to make informed decisions about the planning, the safeguards, and the appropriateness of the system. Measure is to develop metrics to evaluate the risk and also to evaluate the efficiency of the measure to counter them. And last, manage is to put in place a true mitigation and monitoring system to keep the system safe. So let's dig a little bit into those pillars. So AI governance is very important. As I said before, it's a framework that will guide the design, the development, the deployment, and the use of a responsible AI system. So, for example, at Microsoft in 2018, we've published our responsible AI standard principles, not standard principle first, which are 6 of them: fairness, privacy and security, transparency, reliability and safety, inclusiveness and accountability. So everybody should have principles. It's a good thing to have, but it's not sufficient. Principles are not auto-executing. They are maybe subject to interpretation. They are not saying anything about the how. So what we do next is we've deployed a responsible AI standard to translate these principles into implementation guide, implementation rules. So for example, each of these principles, we define goals to be achieved to meet, to uphold these values. And for each of the goals, we develop what we call requirements, which are concrete steps to achieve these goals. And obviously, to operationalize all this development, we have developed implementation resources like training, tools, testing, framework, and methodology that are mandatory to be used by our engineering teams. The core to maintain the standard is to have a central governance body. At Microsoft, for example, it's named ORA, Office of Responsible AI. Its core responsibility has been to develop this standard, to maintain it because it's evolved. We created before generative AI. To do regulatory watch, very important. I mentioned EU AI Act, define the organization model, the role and responsibility on key process like the sensitive use case process, very important for the EU AI Act, and of course put in place the last piece, which is the oversight framework, develop a recording system, monitoring, auditing process for the end to keep all the organization compliant. So we are not only using our responsible standard internally to develop the system we are developing internally, but we must use it also when anytime we are involved in partnership with customer or partners to develop AI system. And we are publicly committed to share our experience and resources. For example, this standard V2 has been published in 2022, and you can use it. And just to give you a sense of the investment, we have more than 400 people involved in this governance framework effort at Microsoft. Another piece of information that you can use and we have published, it's the responsible impact assessment goals and guide. Very important step before any project. We must at Microsoft do an impact assessment to evaluate the potential harms the system, the use case can have on individual, on groups, on organization, on potential society. So it's very important to have this, to identify early in the cycle the risk. It's also help us to identify potential sensitive use case, and it will help us also to pick up in our responsible standard the right goals and requirements that we must implement for this particular use case. Another area of focus will be to identify any additional risk or increased scope of risk that will be induced by the model you intend to use. All the models are not equal. Some of them more powerful, like GPT-4o, for example. So it's a good practice to use the system cars or the transparency note provided by the model providers. A key practice we've put in place at Microsoft is giving the wide range and diversity of risk, is to drive what we call AI red testing. It's adversarial attack where we mix diverse teams of both experts in cybersecurity, for example, but also, very important, genuine business users, because they can discover some harms that won't be discovered by the classical technical expert. So once you identify the risk, very important to put in place the mitigation layer. Usually, it's the defense in depth is organized around these 4 layers of the application stack. The first 2 layers, the model and the safety system, are what we call platform level mitigation. They are common to a lot of different applications. And the next 2 layers, the system message and user experience, are more specific to the type of use case and your business context. So the model is very important to choose the right model for the right task, evaluate the risk, as I said before, and also evaluate the opportunity to fine-tune it for your specific use case. The next level, safety system, it's remember the 4 examples I give you, how you can make sure that your model cannot be jailbreak indirectly or directly, cannot generate harmful content, will not hallucinate, etc. So usually AI platform provide a lot of controls, and in this case Microsoft, we have controls to detect harmful content, to detect direct jailbreak, indirect jailbreak, hallucinations, if the model generates IP protected content, etc., etc. It's a built-in control you can leverage. At the application level, system message is where you are going to put in the what we call message prompt or system prompt some additional behavior. As I said, jailbreak will be a tentative by user to override this meta prompt instruction. Very important to craft them very carefully. And grounding, it's make sure that your answer is grounded in a trusted business source or trusted data source. Don't neglect the last part, the user experience level, very, very important. For example, we are providing a free documentation named the Axe Toolkit, Human AI experience that will make sure that you implement best practices, for example, to keep the user in control, let him know that he is interacting with a generative AI system, having a way to give feedback, having a way to be aware of the limitation of the model, being able to control the outputs of the model and eventually keep it or discard it, etc., etc. This layer is very, very important. So we are providing a lot of documentation and resources for you, so you have the link in the presentations. Once you have identified your risk, you have developed metrics to measure it, and you have implemented the technical mitigation, you are ready to deploy your system. So there you need a delivery and operational plan once your system is in production. So it's a good practice to have a phased delivery plan. First, to maybe deploy your solution to a small set of users to get feedback and to identify early issues with the system before deploying it to a wider audience. Then develop, it's mandatory, an incident response plan to react to incident and evaluate the time it will take to react to unforeseen events. Usually, it's a good idea to have a rollback plan to be able to revert the solution to previous states in case of a major incident. Also, prepare for unanticipated harms. So it's a good practice to have abilities to block harmful prompt or to block specific users or specific application or specific client IP that are abusing the system, if you can detect them. And lastly, I said before, give a mechanism for the user to give feedback or at least to report issues. It could be missing content, harmful content or whatever, and having generally a monitoring in production, a telemetry that will evaluate the potential functional gap, the user satisfactions, or some misconception in the user interface, for examples. So these are quickly to briefly introduce it. It's in 10 minutes what is a risk-based approach and what you can do in terms of operationalize this risk-based approach. So Arnaud, how can we be more concrete now?
Yes, I think it can look kind of overwhelming when you listen to all of that. I'm a clinician. So actually, how are we going to put like responsible AI into practice? And I just want to share with you this initiative where we call the Europe Train. So Train is not a regular system. Train means like truthworthy, responsible AI network. So it's a consortium of different healthcare organizations, so key leaders in Europe, with funding member mainly in the north part of Europe. And actually, they all have the same challenging. You know, they have EIs, they do project, and they want to deploy the responsible AI framework, but they feel like they're alone. So the goal is to collaborate together, and the main goal, and Microsoft is a technology enabler with this team. So what they want to achieve is to make sure they will operationalize responsible AI principle, leveraging technology safeguard, collaborate in a standardized manner to make sure they address safety, reliability, and all bias in AI model, aligning with the responsible AI framework and local and European regulation. And finally, it's also to create an AI outcome registry to make sure they show the value of adding responsible AI in the clinical workflow. And finally, they also want to share with organizations that don't have the means, to deploy responsible AI through guideline and best practice. So this has been launched in June 24. So today it's kind of a call for action for me because there's no French, German, and UK healthcare organizations. So I think it's very important to have some joining this consortium, and I can connect the dots. And how do you know you could be a good organization to join the Train network? I think there's 4 key questions. So it seems to be basic question, but you are an organization, I'm a hospital. So first question is, can you list all the AI that are running in your hospital? AI that you build or AI that you bought through startup? So I think it's the first question. If you can't answer that, I think you're not the right client. Local testing, so did you test your AI prior, deploying, and after? Third question is, do you have a bias assessment? So did you put a bias assessment and making sure you mitigated it? And finally, do you have a data or AI governance to make sure that you can scale the AI project in your organization? So If you're this type of hospital, you'll be the perfect candidate to join this network, and I'll be happy to connect the dots. Thank you.
And just as a conclusion, we have a lot of resources. Again, we are publicly committed to share our experts and resources. So, we, for example, in May last year, we have we have published our first responsible AI transparency report. We share our journey to develop responsible AI and responsible AI with generative AI system in particular. And we have published a lot of tools, more 30 different tools, more than 100 features, more than 33 transparency notes. So don't hesitate if you want to know more about the journey, how Microsoft has done to put in place this AI governance and risk-based approach. Don't hesitate to consume this resource. We have a lot of resource to share with you. So thank you. I think we finish our time.